I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, April the 9th. And after that wild week last week of being down and then back up and then down again and then back up and just every which way on your futures, on your fats, on your feeder cattle, everything having to do with the cattle business. Now what? What do we do now? Where are we at? Where are we going to start this thing? I expect that some of your high volume sales, they've got cattle to sell in places like Oklahoma City, OKC West. They've had very light receipts. Even though there's not a lot of cattle running right now, they are going to have some numbers that need to be coming in, and I would assume they would be quite a bit higher because this market is driving off of some midweek support from last week and some late week fat cattle sales that you probably won't hear anywhere else besides this report. I look at the board for last week. June live cattle futures ended the week at 102.32, down just a quarter after all that suffering that we saw early in the week last week. Your April fats ended the week at 112.22, down $1.53. And August, the ones we were talking about last week that looked like they were undervalued because we haven't seen a lot of feeder cattle going on feed here for the last couple 3 weeks. They turned around, ended up at 102.57. That was actually $1.10 higher than the end of the previous week. May feeder cattle ended the week at 135.62, up $1.60. April ended the week at 135.32, and if you go way out to October, we do see a premium on some of those fall cattle, which we don't normally see a premium in that late fall cattle, but we're seeing it this year. But October ended at 142.62. Your fat cattle trade was impossible to keep up with. Other than Kansas and Texas selling there early Tuesday, or mostly 117, then it was just all over the board. After that, we saw the Northern Plains sell some cattle quite a bit lower than that, 114, quite a bit of 114.5, but then coming back up to 118 on the bulk of their sales. And then we saw Colorado and western Nebraska, which hadn't sold anything all week, start selling some stuff late Friday at 119.50, and that's what's going to lend support going into this week. And we're standing on pretty good ground, as volatile as this thing is, but with a wide range of live sales from 114 all the way to 119.50. Through Thursday on 54,800 head in the 5-area feeding region, your weighted average on live steers was 116.33, which was $4.64 lower than the weighted average from the previous week, but did not include those 119.50 cattle, and a pretty good scattering of cleanup 118 trade in the Northern Plains. So it's going to be better than that by the time we figure out what that is early this week. Your dress sales had a big range too, and were really better than the live sales in the Northern Plains we saw, but 184 to 192 on a range of your dress steers, with a weighted average through Thursday, mind you, at 187.65, which was $4.68 lower than the weighted average from the previous week. Box beef cutout values drifted lower all week last week, and it was initially the select that kept falling off, and your choice was holding steady. But then late in the week last week, they needed to move some product, so increased the offerings, and the prices really fell on your choice too, and they both ended up down about the same amount. But choice cutouts on the average trade from last week was $217.41, down $4.31, but that's quite a bit better than where they ended up Friday afternoon, so it's continuing lower. Select cuts 207.58 on the average of last week's trade. That was down 436, but a good movement on the heavy offerings. Your slaughter kind of was lagging all week last week, but then when we ended up for the week, it included a projection of 44,000 head harvest on Saturday, and that's big, a lot bigger than that pre-Easter Saturday the week before. So 615,000 head for the week projected. That was up 21,000 compared to the previous week, and up 37,000 from the same week a year ago. Your feeder markets, we saw the big wide swerves in that. A lot of it having to do with the little tariff or big tariff standoff that we're seeing, and a possibility of trade wars. You know, Trump's pushing back on China, trying to get back some of the trade that we've lost to them, over $500 billion. And almost every industry has seen a little rub on this because it has to do with their products. It finally come down on farming as China come back and said, well, if you guys are going to do that, we're going to start putting tariffs of 25% on your hogs and on your soybeans. So when we saw that on soybeans, of course, your commodity markets are going to put a lot of volatility in that because they love volatility. But down big middle of the week, which lent a lot of support to your feeder cattle, and that in turn kind of lent support to your fat cattle trade. And I'm not sure how that works, but it seems like it always does. But your real-time index on Beef Market Central based on the 800-pound steer late in the week, late in the day on Friday, was at 135.59, and that was actually 60 cents higher than it ended the previous week. At cash feeders, like I say, trends were just all over the place. On light receipts and the big volume sales early last week, they were down big. But then we saw that recovery on the board, and then we saw some Wednesday and especially Thursday sales sharply higher and getting into some quotes that we haven't seen for weeks and weeks. But then Friday kind of continued that. But your market, you would think on your cash feeders ended near steady but driving. And like I said, I think we should see a pretty good spark early in the week on your feeder cattle sales, and they should have some cattle to sell. But some individual quotes on Friday: Bloomington, Wisconsin, and that's a big feeder sale, and that's where they're going to be holding the World Champion Livestock Auctioneer Contest here in a couple of months. But on Friday, they sold 54 head of 827-pound steers at 138.25. And then look at Magnus Livestock Market in Huron, South Dakota on Friday. Had a big load, 65 head of 982-pound steers at 125.10. That's your feeder flash for Monday.